Hello, everyone. I'm back. My name is Robin Da Vinci, and I am going to tackle a very, very controversial topic today: Social Security and Medicare. And I want to start by giving you a little bit of history. Obviously, all this information is available if you do a deep dive into Social Security and Medicare, but I'm going to, as a boomer, give you some history. In 1935, FDR decided to enact the Social Security Act because it was after the Depression, after the stock market crash, after World War I, and prior to our involvement in World War II. And his theory was, and the government's theory at the time is, that it wasn't a good idea to have people not taken care of, starving or not having some income when they were older. So the first Social Security check was in 1940 to the tune of $22.54. So back in 1940, believe it or not, that was a lot of money, and that was a big help to people who needed bread, milk, eggs, butter, those kind of things. And that's what it was put in place for. Well, as you know, then we started our involvement in World War II. And after that, the Industrial Revolution hit. And here we are in 1945, 1946, after the war. People are back at work. The war created a lot of jobs. And it was the end of Truman and the beginning of Eisenhower. Now, the whole purpose of Social Security was just to help people who were retired, and maybe disabled, but basically retired. And it was never meant to be something that was in place of your own money that you earned, or some sort of retirement program or savings account that you had put money away for yourself. It was never intended to be the only money you ever made. Also, none of us were supposed to live this long. The average age was 63, and they set Social Security at 65. And they thought, oh my goodness, most people don't make it to 65. So there's really no problem with it running at 65 years of age. Well, now, since the Industrial Revolution and modern medicine, people are living into their 70s and 80s with no problem. So you can see the first part of Social Security, where they thought people would just die before they were 65, didn't happen. Yes, I know people that have died before they were that age, and they have paid in, and maybe someone got a benefit after their death. But the idea that we would all die prior to reaching the age of 65 was kind of not funny. It was what it was like back then. So now, fast forward to an age where modern medicine keeps you alive. There's drugs that help you stay healthy. People that might have died from heart attacks or high cholesterol, they're not dying anymore. So Social Security becomes this big controversial topic that no one knows how to fix. Very similar to medical insurance for all. It's something people want to tackle. There's a lot of people that are angry about it, but there's no one good solution. So now you understand that in 1935, when this was put into place, people weren't supposed to live past 35 years of age, 65 years of age. So consequently, this program sort of outlived its usefulness. Now, during the course of time, Social Security has been a political football. It is always controversial. It's always caused a bit of anger in Congress. It makes people upset. You can get more people to answer the question about Social Security being an entitlement instead of something we're entitled to because we paid for it than any other topic. When I'm on Facebook on a controversial issue, you get comments, you get anger from both sides, whatever. But when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, people get furious. So now that you know it was started in 35, was meant to start in 1935 was meant to go for people who reached the age of 65, and most people died before that. You can see how we delivered a big problem to the government and to the American citizens when we started living longer and taking more out. Okay, so that's the history. If you go to the 70s, early 80s, and the administration of Ronald Reagan was an opponent of Social Security. He didn't really believe in it. He signed an act that was really not meant to support Social Security, and he believed in privatizing it. So what happened was when he did all his tax cuts in the 80s, he had no way to fund the government. So he instituted a payroll tax. And that's where that came from. It's not a dig on Ronald Reagan. I'm not making any political statements in this. I'm just trying to give you the facts. So payroll tax started in the 80s. And payroll tax for the employer was very low. Money was taken out of an employee's payroll, but it wasn't matched dollar for dollar by the employer. But it sort of progressed to that. And in 1990, it became clear that we were using these taxes and putting them into a general fund, and we were funding wars and we were funding other programs, but we were really not funding Social Security. Some people have the idea, millions of people have the idea that there's like this savings account with all that money that went into Social Security and Medicare, but there isn't. It actually went into a general fund and been used. There's sort of a floating around $2.7 trillion IOU to Social Security from the government general funds. So when you think of the mind-boggling amount of $2.7 trillion that was used from payroll tax and Social Security, you go, really? I think that 2.7 trillion, if it was put back, would help us. But it's certainly not that easy. It's not going to happen. In the year 2000, during the George Bush administration, it went to 6.2% for Social Security, and it stayed that way for the last 23 years. That was when it was 6.2% taken out of your gross wages and 6.2% matched by your employer. Now, you'd say, well, that sounds fair. Okay, but that's 12.4% going into a general fund somewhere. And even though they call it a trust account, it really isn't. Trust accounts, let me give you an example. When you pay sales tax on something in whatever state you live in, that sales tax belongs to the state. So it doesn't go into any general fund for the state. It goes to their sales tax account. They keep track of you. Now, it may be a little simplistic to say that, but if you collect sales tax, it belongs to the state. It does not belong to you. And they call it a sales tax trust fund. Now, it does go to pay for everything the state government has to run, but it's not like something that you can fudge around with. Well, we thought that was true of Social Security and Medicare, but it really isn't. Medicare's 1.45% that is taken out of your paycheck for as long as you make money is also something that gets a little messed around with. So we're not saying, oh my goodness, there's an account with my name on it with all the money I've paid in, and now they're just paying me back for the money I put in. No, it actually went into a general fund, or what they like to refer to as a trust fund, to make us all feel better. And they're using it for as many different reasons as there are dollars in the account. And also, at one point, we borrowed $49 billion from the Chinese to shore up our lack of funds in our government. So we've done a lot of manipulating. All presidents have done it. There isn't one president that you can point to that saved the Social Security Administration or saved anything. All presidents have had budgets to run, and all of them have used funds from these accounts. Now, let's get into the mechanics of how it works just for a minute before your eyes glaze over. Right now, currently, if you earn up to $160,200, 6.2% will be taken out of your check and sent to the government. Also, 6.2% is charged to your employer, and that gets sent to the government. And that is why you'll hear employers wanting to hire contractors and not have employees. They don't want to pay 6.2% in payroll tax. They want you to. And a contractor pays both sides themselves, where an employer has to pay that 6.2%. Medicare the same way. No matter how much you earn in the year, even if it's $850,000, you will be charged 1.45%. Also, there will be an additional 0.9% over $200,000 to help fund Medicare. And the employer has to pay 1.45% for the rest of your salary as well. So you can see that an employer is going 7.65% to have this employee. I'd rather not. So that's one of the controversies that is in place in Social Security and Medicare. The fact that a corporate employer or a small business employer has to pay out 7.65%. And most people don't earn $160,200 a year, so they're paying that 7.65% on you for the entire year every year, plus all the other taxes that they pay and unemployment that they put in on behalf of their employees. So we saw this shift over time to everybody going, I don't want employees anymore. I don't want to pay workers' comp. I don't want to pay tax. That's where the controversy comes from. It's a rather large amount, and it's been in place since 1990. And then in 2000, it went to 6.2%. So it is a big tax. Think about it. So when you get into the why is this a political football, people on either side of the aisle will say, no, we need to charge it. And the other side will say, employees should be putting 6.2% away in their own savings account, and the employer should be off the hook. Why are we doing this? And it was all with good intentions, okay? So if you go back to 1935 and see why it was put in place and see how it benefited people through and after the war, people who retired, I don't think the young people remember that or know that you were forced to retire when you turned 65. My first experience in that was when I was working in 1969 in bookkeeping, and the man I worked for turned 65 2 days after I turned 18, and he had to leave his job, and he had no choice. At 65, you retired. Now, I'm not sure that every company enforced that, but it was pretty much across the board. When you turned 65, you had to quit working. One of the upsides now is once you reach your full retirement age, and you have to look it up by birth date. Mine was 66, but some people are 67 and 3 months. Once you reach full retirement age, you can continue to work, pay into the system without penalty. Before full retirement age, there are penalties for earning money if you collect Social Security earlier than your full retirement age. So imagine you're 62 and your full retirement age is 67, but you think, I want my money now because I don't trust the government to have it there when I'm 67. You get a reduced amount at the age of 62. And if you continue to work, there's a ceiling on that money, extra money you earn of $21,000 something, and then you have to pay back $1 for every $2 you earn. And in the last year before your full retirement age, you can earn $56,000 plus and only pay back $1 for every $3 you earn. So the government encourages you to pay in and not collect until your full retirement age. And now they're even saying, can you wait till you're 70? So you can see that if you're in your 60s and your full retirement age might be at 66, and you don't claim anything and you keep putting in and you collect at 70, you've given them a boost of funds until you're 70 when you try to collect. Now, why is this so controversial still? And why do they keep throwing it out there and say, we're going to get rid of it, we want it done? And then there's a hue and cry from the population that says, don't you touch our Social Security and Medicare. What they're afraid of is that it just doesn't have any assets. It's not invested anywhere. The money has just been, quite frankly, thrown away. Used for wars, used for this, used to fund that, used to make other programs work. So Social Security is not an entity of its own if you think of it with money sitting there in some big account. No, that's why it's controversial. People are afraid. They don't know what's going to happen when all these people who aren't dying before they're 65 or 70 are still pulling money out of the system. And young people are saying, why am I giving money into a system that I may never get to use? I can see why it's a big political football. I can see why it's controversial, but I don't see anybody else coming up with another solution other than privatizing it and saying, okay, some of the people that are already collecting, you oldsters that are already getting the money, we have to keep funding you. But all you young people, come up with an alternative. Okay, what's the alternative? 6.2% comes out of your salary and goes into a savings account. You do it automatically. You say to your employer, I want 6.2% of my check to go to this savings account. And, if you have to pay 6.2% to the government, that's not my problem. And then the employer would say, well, if I don't have to match you because you're not putting into Social Security, then I can save that money. I want to tell you that these programs are not bad programs. They just aren't funded. And we've allowed for the last 50, 60 years for people to use the money without any accountability. If we all sat down and said, okay, we want to know where the money went, we would probably, faint or hide, because there is no money in a Social Security account. I want to make that clear. It really is something that's been used for everything else. And I understand that people are scared. Now, if you have no intention of saving money because you're living paycheck to paycheck, when they take the Social Security out, you would like to make the assumption that at least that money would be there when you got older. It's not that easy to save money anymore, and there's a big disparity in salaries. There are people that make, in some states, $10 to $12 an hour, and they don't have any additional money to put away. Social Security was meant to be part of a retirement program, not the only money in a retirement program. It was meant to supplement things that you made, decisions you made when you were younger about saving money. But we all know that a major illness, college funding, and all kinds of things can take away from your retirement program if you were lucky enough to get one. I have no criticisms of anybody who cannot get money put away. It is not that easy to save money these days, and you would have to be incredibly disciplined. And, when we were all going, oh, yay, there's Social Security, and we were, naive enough to believe that it would always be there, we had sort of a safety net. And now the rantings and ravings of Congress about how there's no safety net anymore has really scared people. And I understand it. And, the boomers were the ones that came right after World War II, 1946 to 1964. We're considered the boomers, and we are certainly living longer than anybody anticipated. But we are also paying into the system continually. Almost everybody in my age group still works, or they at least work part-time and pay in. For those of you who are very young and don't understand why you were paying in, that's something you need to tackle with your representatives in local government and your representatives at the state and federal level. If there's going to be a change, It might not even be in the hands of Gen X. It might be in the hands of younger generations in order to change what has happened. I can tell you, if they were able to take that IOU to Social Security and put the 2.7 trillion back in and not try and balance budgets with it and fund wars with it, we might be able to say, hey, Social Security is not a bad deal. Meantime, when you hear the rhetoric and the inflammatory words and the thrown out entitlements, this is not an entitlement. This is not a government handout. There are millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of hardworking people who have been contributing to that program for the whole time they've been an adult. I started working when I was 17. I'm now 71 and I'm still working. There have been very few years where I haven't paid into that system. So when you hear people yelling, it's not an entitlement, but I'm entitled to it, that is the true dichotomy of the Social Security and Medicare program. On a side note, the single Medicare program works really well. It's too bad there's been so much fraud perpetrated against it. And it's too bad that the health insurance lie in this country and the way that it's handled has harmed people greatly. But Medicare in its pure form is a very good program. It just isn't funded properly. And, what can I say? There will be controversy until there is a complete overhaul. And can there be an overhaul? I don't know if anybody in government right now has the stomach to overhaul it. Just like the healthcare system and what they like to call Obamacare, which was really the Affordable Care Act, even though people criticize it and it's probably 60 to 70% effective, there's been nobody that's been able to come up with anything better. I was never an opponent or a proponent of the Affordable Care Act. I really analyzed it. I asked people in the insurance world what their opinion was it. And I was told by several well-informed people in insurance that the original Affordable Care Act was 80% spot on. And once big business got a hold of it and the corporate world got a hold of it, it was whittled down to being 60% effective. So yeah, 40% not effective is kind of crappy. So while we continue to criticize the Affordable Care Act, we haven't come up with anything better. And that's because we are 350 million people in this country, and there's no single thing that can help us all. Am I moderate in my approach? Yeah, but I'm really, really someone who does a lot of research. And if I have an opinion that is in favor of or opposed to, I will say it here. But in these two cases, Social Security and Medicare, it's really flawed, but no one can come up with anything better, at least not yet. I applaud them trying. Please try. Try and get a better system. Try and get something that doesn't go into the general fund and gets used for things most of us don't want it to be used for. I get it. I get the upset. I get that people mouth off too. I've seen people on both sides of the aisle just mouthing off about things when there's no substantive backup for it. What can I say? Read. Don't just read headlines. Dig deep. Go historical. Find out. Be an educated voter. Find out what your representatives stand for. Figure it out. Social Security and Medicare are not the biggest enemies. And I think if you dig deep, you'll find out why. Anyway, thank you for listening. I welcome your comments. I welcome a subscribe and like. I wrote a book called The Common Sense Guidebook to Mastering Your Money, Critical Thinking Skills You Should Have Had as a Kid, but you weren't taught those skills. That's my book, The Common Sense Guidebook to Mastering Your Money. Read it. It'll help you day to day. Maybe it'll help you save money in another savings account. Maybe it'll get you to put some money away weekly. Who knows what it'll do? Read the book, read about Social Security and Medicare, and be a more informed voter. I mean, what else can we ask for? The mechanics of Social Security and Medicare are huge. It's kind of an overwhelming topic, but I encourage you to learn more about it. Don't just listen to the controversies and the rhetoric. Find out the truth. Go back, learn the history. That's the best way to be smart. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe. I'll talk to you again.